5 million young people who are not working. We have 15 million Kenyans who today are blacklisted in CRB. We have 10 million citizens who have no access to credit in the micro and small enterprise sector. And I believe I am the candidate with a plan to be able to get Kenya to the next level.
Thank you, Honorable Ruto, for your opening statement. Let's get right into the first topic of discussion here tonight, and that is the cost of living, something that many Kenyans are concerned about tonight. At the moment, Honorable Ruto, we currently have 3 subsidies in place on fuel, on unga, on fertilizer, all aimed at dealing with the cost of living. Do you believe that subsidies are the way to go and are the right approach at this moment to deal with this issue?
I believe that subsidies can alleviate the problem to an extent, especially when we find ourselves in the situation where we are. My position is that we find ourselves at this port because there are certain things we didn't do right. We had a Big Four plan because we foresaw this situation. We were here in 2017. To deal with the cost of living, you just have to increase agricultural productivity. And to increase productivity, agricultural productivity, you need to do 3 things. Number 1, make sure farmers have access to inputs, fertilizer, seeds, pesticides. Make sure the farmers have the necessary capital to be able to do the farming. And 3, make sure they have access to markets that are not rigged. Unfortunately, we didn't do that, and that's why we find ourselves in the situation we're in. So that's why in our plan, as Kenya Kwanza, we have set out with clarity what we need to do. We have put in place a 30 billion revolving fund to make sure that farmers have access to inputs. We have added a 12 billion shilling expenditure on agricultural extension, because it's not just enough to have inputs. It's also important for farmers to use the latest information on how to get our farming right and increase the productivity of every farmer. And the statistics show, with access to fertilizer, with access to certified seed, with access to capital, a farmer who produces 5 bags can produce 15. So we can actually double, if not triple, our agricultural output. What that means is that the 2 million farmers who today are net importers of food themselves can actually produce surplus. And we can make sure that we have sufficient supply that ensures that the prices are reasonable for everybody. So the real solution to the cost of living, especially on matters food, because we all understand the biggest contributor to the high cost of living is the cost of food. The average expenditure of families is 52% of their income. In fact, poorer families spend between 60 and 65% of their income on food. So dealing with the cost of food significantly deals with the challenge of high cost of living.
Honorable Deputy President, if I may just interject, what you say today has also been said by you before. In the first term of your administration, you pledged the same, that you are going to deal with agriculture, you're going to support farmers, and that's when the first fertilizer subsidy was rolled in, before it was embroiled in scandal. And you'd also promised the Galana Kulalu project. When you say today that the food security aspect of the Big Four agenda was sabotaged, what exactly do you mean? What failed in the Big Four agenda with regards to food security?
Precisely that. It was sabotaged.
By who and how?
Because you know as well as I do that we never got to implement that plan. Immediately, we changed course, and the whole Big Four plan was shelved. And we went on a tangent because of the handshake equation. We went to handshake, to BBI, and the rest is history. We didn't get the time to do what we had promised the people of Kenya to do. In fact, immediately thereafter, I tried, like has been tradition for me, to support my boss. And many times, I tried to push the Big Four plan to the extent that my boss, the president, asked me that he wanted to do things differently. And he requested that he wanted to assemble a different group of people to help him deliver on what he wanted to be the legacy of the fourth president. And unfortunately, the Big Four suffered a big blow because the whole of that program did not take place.
Galana Kulalu project, Honorable Deputy President, was launched during the first term. What happened? What went wrong? Why did it fail?
The Galana Kulalu project was conceived. In fact, what happened is the first 10,000, the pilot on the first 10,000 program took place. In fact, the first harvest of maize in that program came into being. And the recommendations from the trial on that project was we needed to build a dam because the water from the river was not sufficient to do the Galana Kulalu project. We needed to scale up now and do the dam so that the water that was available, because the soils research and the trials showed that the soils could actually support the production of maize and other cereals. Unfortunately, it didn't move from there because we didn't get the dam sorted. And you know that we had actually 57 dams that we would have wanted to do. Unfortunately, they didn't happen. They suffered.
So why didn't you do the dams, Honorable Deputy President? And the former ambassador of Israel to Kenya also said that they were facing frustration in supporting the Kenyan government on this. Why did you not do the dams? Why did you not go ahead with the implementation of the Galana Kulalu project?
The Galana Kulalu project, as I have told you, was part of a wider plan to make sure that we move our agricultural productivity from rain-fed to irrigation. And it was not just about Galana Kulalu, it was a series of other dams, including what we call the High Grand Fall dams that was supposed to feed into the lower part of the Tana. It was Lowat Dam in Turkana. It was Radat Dam in Baringo. There was a big plan around that was now supposed to roll into place with now our targeted, because our second term was targeted at agricultural productivity and food security. And we had now made it the deliverable for our second term. And as I have told you, our second term program ran into headwinds.
Honorable Ruto, just to continue to understand Galana Kulalu, because that was a big project that had it have succeeded, might have solved quite a few of the issues we have with respect to food security. The Auditor General conducted a report and cited weaknesses in the contracting of it. First, that there was single sourcing, and that even the manner in which the contract itself was done, in terms of payments that were tied to the contractor. And so raising a number of issues around the manner in which the contract itself was put together, that then states that this was something that was going to fail anyway. And so what's your response to that with respect to the manner in which contracting is done in this country, particularly with Galana Kulalu, which was a big project under the first term of the Jubilee administration, of which you are a part?
I quite agree that issues were raised around the contract, and that is why the contract actually was shelved with a balance. It didn't go the full hog, because when those issues were identified, it led to the contract being stopped so that those issues could be addressed. But by the time it was getting there, already the trials had been done, the pivots had been set up, the first crop had been harvested, and we already had the template on what actually needed to be done, because the contract, the initial contract, was for the first 10,000 acres. The real contract was for the 1 million acres, which was really the target for food production. But as I have told you, that is not the only project we were looking at for food production. And let me also say that even without the implementation of the Galana Kulalu, supporting the farmers as they are today would still guarantee us a situation where we would not be in the situation we are in. Today, for the first time in Kenya, the price of unga has gone to 230 in some cases. It's never been that bad. I must say, as a former Minister for Agriculture, serving under President Kibaki, I am the minister who assembled the infrastructure that provide subsidy on fertilizer. And we saw an increase of 5 million bags of maize when we rolled that plan. When the fertilizer subsidy was cancelled 2 years ago, that is why we are where we are. We are not here because Galana failed. We are here because we didn't do what we needed to do with our farmers the way they are today. What Galana Kulalu was supposed to give us is actually that extra production that would even make it possible for Kenya to export. There is absolutely no reason why Kenya today is spending 12 billion shillings to import maize from Uganda or from Tanzania. We should be net exporters of maize, for example, but we are not. And the reason why we are not is because our agricultural sector is undercapitalized. We have removed the support that farmers always had. And that is why, for the first time, because of the things we didn't do, because of the removal of the fertilizer subsidy, for the first time, the price of unga has gone to 230.
Honorable Deputy President, you say that a lot was done in the first term, and that is why we got to a point where in 2017 we still had a rise in food prices?
In 2017, it was specifically because of drought. And for your information, the prices of flour, maize flour, went to 140. It didn't go to 230. That's the whole difference.
However, then,
even in the situation of drought in 2017, what the debate then was, 2 kilogram packet of maize was retailing at 140. Today, it is retailing at 230 because compounded with the drought, we just did not produce as we should have produced because we didn't support the farmers the way we have always supported the farmers.
Honorable Ruto, I'd like to speak about another issue that is a contributing factor to the cost of living, and that is the high cost of fuel in the country. What do you propose to do with that? Because there's also a current subsidy in place for that. What do you think is the solution to the rising cost of fuel, which, as you know, drives the cost of a number of other products?
I think the first thing that we need to do is to look at the taxes, because 50% almost of the cost of fuel in Kenya is taxes. I think it's time, as a country, we looked at, I think there are 15 different taxes on fuel. And I think it's time we relooked at how else do we raise revenue.
Which taxes would you be proposing to remove from fuel, the cost of fuel?
I think majority of the are in that bracket. I think there are almost 15 different taxes that are there. I do not have the specifics, but those 15, I think we need to interrogate these 15 different taxes. Which ones can we put aside so that, like other countries, we can limit the taxation on fuel? Take, for example,
let me
VAT.
ask, yeah. Yes, okay,
take,
carry
for
on.
example, VAT.
Correct.
I think we need to rethink taxation, VAT taxation on fuel. That was the latest inclusion of taxes on fuel. And I think it was very controversial.
Yeah, Honorable Ruto, VAT on petroleum products was indeed controversial. Let me take you back to 2013 when VAT was imposed on this as a condition by IMF. At the time, then Majority Leader Aden Duale said, and I quote, "The 181 members have been convinced by our party leader and our deputy party leader on the rationale of 8% VAT on petroleum products." He went on to say, 181 is a very big number and we will convince our members from the NASA side. So you, at this point in the year 2015, I believe, when this was passed, were pushing for 8% to be added on VAT. Today, you are saying you want to abolish VAT on petroleum products. Why should Kenyans believe you today?
Why wouldn't they? I mean, we live in a dynamic country, and it's only fools who don't change their mind. If you are in a situation where the price of fuel has gone to 160, I mean, it's time to think. I mean, when this VAT was imposed, then the price of fuel was under 100.
Honorable Ruto, when the VAT was imposed, it was at the time a condition by IMF when we were seeking a precautionary facility. Today we find ourselves in the exact same position with a third tranche of an IMF facility, and once again they are calling for the same issue that we are facing with VAT then is the same one we are facing now. And at the point, IMF has in fact said that we do not need to be removing taxes on petroleum products. So with an IMF facility already in place, are you then saying you are going to go back to the IMF and renegotiate the terms of that loan that is already in place regarding IMF VAT on fuel products?
What's wrong with negotiating with IMF? I think any reasonable government, looking at the situation where we are, looking at the cost of living and how many Kenyans are every day sinking below the poverty line, I think it takes a courageous government to sit down with our development partners, and they are fairly reasonable people, and have a discussion. And I think they are, if not 8%, we need to renegotiate on some of the items that are outstanding. And apart from looking at that, there are other instruments that we can deploy. For example, we have the fuel subsidy fund. We need to think about how that fund is being used, how we are deploying it. Are we deploying it correctly? Is it giving us value? And what changes can be made? We need an open and frank conversation with our development partners who support us. And to the best of our knowledge, they are not unreasonable. They are reasonable people, and they can entertain a conversation on negotiating some of the terms that have been offered to us.
Honorable Ruto, I think that will take us into our second conversation tonight, and that is on the issue of national debt. And I'd like to pick up just where you left off. You say our partners, are open to renegotiation. However, on the matter of renegotiating our debt, Honorable Ruto, you just last week in an interview with the international press said you will not be entertaining discussions around renegotiating our debt. In fact, with respect to your competitor who is not here with us today, when he brought up the issue, you in fact called his statement on that condescending and reckless. Mr. Deputy President, are you tonight changing your position and saying you will renegotiate and seek to restructure our debt?
Not at all. I still believe, as I stand here, that it is reckless for anybody to say we cannot pay our debts. I believe that we have what it takes to pay our debts. And mark you, what we were discussing about VAT is very different from negotiating our debts.
But it is tied to the IMF facility, which is a loan.
It's completely different.
How so?
What we cannot entertain as a country is a position that we cannot pay. We are in a position that we can't service our debt. We cannot. We need to go out there and renegotiate our debt. I think that would send the wrong signal. What I would do on matters to do with the debt, we have a plan as Kenya Kwanza on how to manage debt. Number one, we have said we will first slow down, put the brakes on borrowing. Number two, we will put brakes on unbudgeted projects. In fact, that is the biggest source of our problem. Projects that are not within the budget, so that we cannot keep our fiscal deficit at what we have committed, 5% or 5.9%. Number three, we need to raise our revenues. And I have said openly that we have areas that we believe that we can raise our revenue. For example, we collect 52% of all collectible VAT. Just by automation and computerization, we collectible VAT. That would give us an extra 450 billion Kenya shillings. And added on to that, if you raise that kind of VAT, you can equally raise from corporate tax an additional 200, maybe 150 billion shillings. So there is room to raise additional funding, additional revenue for us to manage our debt without necessarily going to say we are going to negotiate our debt.
So I hear you saying that our national debt as it stands today is manageable.
Our debt today is a challenge. We need to deal with it. We are not sitting pretty. We are living, if I may say, we are living beyond our means.